Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Fresh Iron Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Kleber. We're going to do something a little different today. Recently, I've been really stepping up my blogging game. I'm super impressed with these ridiculously long and comprehensive, helpful blog posts that I've made. I was writing and I was like, I feel like there needs to be an audio version of this. So I want to try out something, and I'm really interested in your feedback if this works. But I want to try a blog cast situation. So I wrote this post. Oh, I'm so happy with it. It's called The Anxious Nurse's Guide to Thriving in a High Pressure Environment. And I want to read it to you, basically, and put in my little tidbits and anecdotes and things, but just kind of go through the content of this. I'll put a link to it. So if you would prefer to read it or kind of follow along, you can do that. But I think that hearing and have an audio version of this would be extremely valuable. So let's get started. So The Anxious Nurse's Guide to Thriving in a High Pressure Environment. So naturally, being a nurse, you're going to be a little anxious. You might be worried about performing well. And after years of pursuing a nursing degree, it can feel disheartening as a nurse to experience that. But just because you feel anxious doesn't mean it's permanent, doesn't mean it has to happen. You are not resigned to a life of necessarily anxiety related to your job. So I would love to work through a way where we can enjoy the nursing career and manage anxiety, and it's totally doable. Let's do it. Okay. Step one, guys, I really want you to ask yourself, am I an actually anxious nurse or am I just nervous? Okay. Let's differentiate between the feelings of nervousness that come with the job. This job in particular, you're not putting numbers in a spreadsheet, although I guess kind of doc flow is a little bit like putting numbers in a spreadsheet. You're taking care of patients' lives. There's going to be a natural nervousness as you acclimate to that. There's a difference between that and diagnosable anxiety. So let's talk about how that looks. Nervousness can definitely be a normal and healthy response to new or challenging situations. And it often subsides as familiarity and confidence grow. So it's not like a permanent thing. So I think the key difference to keep in mind is the difference between anxiety and nervousness is that nervousness typically subsides once that triggering event is over. So for example, you might feel nervous whenever you have to call a physician, but once that call is over, you might feel balanced and calm again. Or maybe you're nervous about getting or giving a report, but once you get through it, you feel better for the rest of the shift. You can really key in on what you need to do. So nervousness also, the intensity will lessen over the time as you have repeated exposure to those triggering situations because, the unfamiliarity, and that surrounding fear, dissipates. The sting kind of gets dull, and what used to be scary is now no longer a big deal. So that's one thing, right? Let's consider what actually truly being anxious is. Anxiety is a persistent condition with physical symptoms like restlessness, insomnia, psychological symptoms like constant worry and fear. And when these anxiety levels persist, intensify, or interfere with your daily function, it can indicate a more serious issue. So this can manifest through physical symptoms like palpitations, dizziness, excessive sweating, and it impacts our ability to perform effectively. So, critical self-reflection question is, am I suffering from anxiety or am I nervous about very specific work-related situations? So, if you feel like you're likely more nervous, and it might not necessarily just be one thing you're nervous about at work, maybe it's multiple things about work that do make you nervous. I want you to try to identify specifically what makes you nervous, what makes your heart race, your breath quicken, your chest tighten up, what's making you feel like that? Think about when you have these physical, changes during a shift, and what are the triggering events? I want you to physically list all those, write those down. Because when we can externalize emotions and specifically identify situations that make us experience these feelings, processing it is a much more straightforward process. It's a little redundant, but you can make it doable working through that emotion, having some objectivity, like, okay, every time I'm around that CNA and I got to delegate something to her, I avoid it at all costs and I get really nervous. Okay, it's helpful to acknowledge that instead of just like feeling it, but not really like acknowledging it. Okay, helps our brain work through things. So we don't want to stifle, we don't want to stuff, we want to acknowledge it, process it, move forward. Okay. If you notice there's a pattern or specific things, really like specific procedures, situations, consider what you can do to like lessen that, right? If you freak out every time you have to start an IV, let's lean into IVs. Make it your mission to get good at IVs. And then not only will it no longer be a source of stress after you gain confidence, get a whole bunch of reps in, you might be looked to as a resource for that. You might need to chat with a preceptor or a charge nurse or a confidant on the unit. Maybe you need to develop a framework to speak with a physician. Or maybe even just something like reviewing key aspects of like specific common diagnoses that you see all the time. Like if you really avoid chest tubes and they scare you, or if you really don't like taking care of, the MI patient or I don't know, the ARDS patient, something specific, learn everything you can about that thing. Just lean into it. And that confidence can really help mitigate the anxiety. But regardless of the specifics, we're taking a big and overwhelming emotion, externalizing it, and creating actionable steps to actually make it much more manageable. Now, as you can tell, that's for if you're just noticing these situations that exacerbate nervousness. But if you are genuinely an anxious nurse, genuinely have the nurse anxiety that is that level up here, we need to be more intentional, have more of a supportive plan. We want to get the current anxiety under control to a point where you're successfully managing it on a regular basis so that you can work with a clear head and heart. Okay. So let's move forward. Let's say you do have, like, it's not just nervousness, it's actual genuine anxiety. Here's the thing. I want you to lower your baseline level of anxiety. Okay. So I kind of liken this to how we prevent maybe secondary injury in our patients, right? Let's say our patient came in with that heart attack, that myocardial infarction. We want their body to be focused on healing that issue, not dealing with other issues that are coming up. This is why we aggressively monitor their blood pressure, their electrolyte status. We don't want them to have their potassium, their magnesium, their everything out of whack, and then their heart is likely to go into dysrhythmias because we're not paying attention to preventing that actively, right? We want it to focus on one thing. So this is very similar to anxiety because we want to focus on healing the issues related to the anxiety. So we want to lower our overall threshold of things that make us anxious so that when we have these little increases, they're much more manageable. Okay. And let's talk about some of these things. Like let's say if I got all my ducks in a row, I'm doing all the things that I'm about to talk about. I'm doing all those things. And this is my threshold is like right about, here. And for those that are just listening to the podcast, at one level. And that's my threshold. Like when I start feeling symptoms, that's my threshold. But let's say I'm not doing some of the things I'm going to talk about. That threshold's going to be a lot lower. It's going to take a lot less to cause physical symptoms in me because I'm having so many things to manage. So we want to set your body and your brain up for success. So it's the physical body and our brain up for success. So let's talk about things. You're going to be annoyed. I'm sorry, but this is a thing. Deep breathing. Okay. One of those things that happens when you're anxious is, right? Like we're not breathing deeply. So deep breathing activities lower anxiety by engaging both your body and your mind in a way that activates that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest. That helps counteract your stress response, your fight or flight mechanism, okay? When we're stressed or anxious, our breathing becomes irregular and shallow. It limits the amount of air that goes into the body. That deep breathing encourages fuller, slower breaths that increase our oxygen intake and slow down our heart rate and lead to calmness, okay? By focusing on deep diaphragmatic breathing rather than shallow chest breathing, more air gets in, we're going to calm our nerves, our anxiety is going to be easier to manage. So I want you to think about not doing this necessarily just when you're exacerbated. Imagine if you did this every day when you woke up, or in your pre-work routine, this was you take 5 or 6 deep breaths in the car before you get out. Okay. When you go to the bathroom every time on the unit, you're like, all right, every time I go to the bathroom, I have to pause and I have to take 3 deep breaths, slow, intentional deep breaths. And at the same time, you can also have this awareness that also can kind of ground you. We're not like, anxiety is like freaking out about stuff and like all the what ifs and we're worried about so many things. If we're practicing awareness and grounding while we're deep breathing, we can't also be anxious at the same time. Okay. So we take some deep breaths, we pay attention to where we are, what is happening, and allow our body and our brain to focus specifically on this moment right now. And if you're doing that regularly, we're gonna increase that threshold. Okay. An important thing for those of you that are newer to deep breathing, it might feel uncomfortable at first. You might get emotional. It might feel surprisingly difficult, and you might want to give up, and that's normal. Actually, I didn't start really intentionally deep breathing until 2018. I'd been a nurse 8 years. And my goal was, I'm going to do 3 minutes of deep breathing. And I actually have a YouTube video that is linked in this this blog that goes through how to do it. Oh my gosh. It was so difficult. It was so difficult at the beginning. I'm like an athlete. I'm like, I can do this. Like, what? This is easy. It's just breathing. No, it was hard. It was actually hard. And as I'm talking, I'm realizing I say, we need to lower our baseline level of anxiety, which simultaneously means we're increasing our threshold. We want it to take a lot to trigger anxiety. So quick clarification there. So with regular practice, you can really move the needle there. Here's another one that you could also incorporate is called progressive muscle relaxation, and partner that with a little acceptance. So this is a technique that involves the tensing and relaxing of muscle groups, promotes relaxation, reduces anxiety. This is a great thing when you're laying in bed, falling asleep to do this. Okay. I'll have a link in the blog post to walk you through the steps. This is especially helpful when you pair it with cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, that's something you're going to have to learn about in like a therapy appointment, but that's called CBT, super effective. So combining those two can be really great. Regular practice increases awareness of the tension in your body and the ability to release it, effectively managing stress in situations. Like even just if you're on the unit and you notice, like we all have probably pretty tight faces. We probably have clenched jaws a bit. Even when I'm sitting on my computer working, I'm realizing, I'm like, pulling up my shoulders and then I'm just like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how tense I was being right now. So just aware of the tension and like trying to relax that. So we don't want to, by doing these things, it prevents things like rumination, where we're like negative thought cycles. So if awareness and acceptance is such a powerful tool, where like, okay, I accept today. I'm right here where I am right now. Accept it. It's good. I'm okay. Everything is okay. I'm safe. That kind of thing. That you need to consciously, if you're in this like fight or flight mode, which is anxiety, consciously telling yourself, I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm having negative thought cycles that I'm going to stop for a moment. Deep breaths, pull all that together and releasing some tension, y'all. That can be extremely powerful. Next, increasing some physical activity or, maintaining it if you already regularly exercise. There's such good, I know y'all know, and we heard, everything is to increase exercise, right? That's like the magic pill that everybody talks about. Well, here's the thing, guys. The amount, I just saw actually yesterday, I wish I saved the citation. I saw a study that showed regular exercise decreased symptoms of depression more effectively than any antidepressant on the market. It's like, now I know there's barriers sometimes to exercise, but just in general, and it doesn't need to be anything crazy like a CrossFit situation. Like exercise, the benefit that it does for many things, like in terms of physical health, but mental health is extraordinary. There's a book that I highly recommend. It's called The Joy of Movement, written by a neuroscientist, Kelly McGonigal. I'll put a link to it. Love her. I've read her other books, but this one was one of my favorites. How it doesn't, there's so many studies that show different types of exercises and how they help and working out together. And it doesn't even need to be anything crazy, like 2 20-minute walks, so you're not sedentary. Now, I do know that as you're at the bedside and you're running around a unit, that's a lot. But like if you're like able to spend some time where you're physically challenging yourself and you're just able to focus on that and you're not multitasking 10 different things like you are at work, how beneficial that is. So I also looked up why specifically physical activity helps anxiety. So let me tell you a couple things. Harvard told me. All right. So this is what Harvard says. So exercise forces you to think about other things, not what you're anxious about. So this is kind of like reinforcing awareness and like actually kind of forcing you to be aware, right? If you're having to do certain exercises or movements, you're focusing on doing those, not about the thing that you're stressed about. Movement also decreases muscle tension. If your body isn't as tense, it doesn't feel as anxious. Ooh, and here's what I do. Every time I work out at the YMCA, I do like 10, 20 minutes in the sauna. That gets rid of tension too. It's lovely. Also, an increased heart rate that occurs with exercise alters brain chemistry, increasing the availability of critical anti-anxiety neurochemicals like serotonin, GABA, some call BDNF. I don't know what that is. Endocannabinoids, like the runner's high, like is a thing. You can get an exercise high. It's like so beneficial for your mental health. 2 more. Exercise also activates your prefrontal cortex. We've talked about that in different episodes about how that is where your higher level executive functioning is. And that therefore calms the reactivity of that amygdala. So your amygdala is a different part of the brain. It is your alert system to detect danger and causes you to kind of freak out, or freak out's not the right thing, but like a fight or flight or fawn or freeze or whatever it might be. When that is like going crazy, it's very difficult to engage in higher level thinking, which is a different part of your brain is responsible for that, your prefrontal cortex. So by exercising, it really makes that, it turns that area of the brain, makes that light up and go. And what we want is that, not our amygdala. And finally, exercising regularly builds up resources that enable you to navigate challenging emotions. That seems so vague, and I put it on here and I looked it up, and it had this really fancy research study that had all these words that I really don't understand exactly what this means, but I thought I'd include it with a link to it. All right, so remember, doesn't need to be anything crazy, but activity. And then for seasons of life too, I got young kids, I got a really busy schedule. If I can get a walk in a day, if I can get in some yoga poses, and then I have some other days where I go to the Y and I do a good workout, and then I do a little sauna situation. And whenever I work out, whenever I work hard at something physically, And working hard for different people means different things, right? You'll see some people at the gym covered in sweat, running like crazy, lifting tons of weight. Great for them. That might not be what works for you, and that's fine. But for your body to work hard, in a way that's safe and helpful. Like, I sleep so much better on the days that I get a good workout in. So that also helps. Another thing, wise lifestyle choices. I had to say this in here. Okay. I can't tell you how many nurses I know who get off work and they need to have a little drinky drink. They need a little alcohol to calm down, to deal with the stress. I get it. I definitely get it. Let me tell you something though. If you have baseline anxiety, we may need to rethink this a little bit. Number one, you may find that you'd have a glass of wine after work to calm down. Now you need two. Now you need three. Oh boy, might as well get a whole bottle since we've already done 3/4 of it. Like, that thing can snowball. But it also doesn't work very well. Like, yes, you have initial relaxation from it, alcohol. This is like a sedative effect for your central nervous system. Temporarily can relieve those feelings, but it's kind of short-lived. Because once that alcohol wears off, that anxiety can return and return more intensely. And that can create a cycle where you depend on alcohol for anxiety relief. This can lead to withdrawal symptoms when you're not drinking and include increased anxiety symptoms like your increase in heart rate, sweating, your hands are trembling, nausea. And also, when you're drinking alcohol, especially in copious amounts, that can also lead to poor food choices, dehydration, and that too exacerbates feelings of anxiety. Alcohol also impacts levels of your sleep quality, so you might pass out, but you're not getting good quality sleep when you have a drunk sleep. And not to mention, like, when people drink a bunch, they can act kind of crazy. Do risky decision making, social embarrassment, which can add to anxiety. So I really encourage, if you're finding that you need to use some booze to chill out after a shift, to examine that. And just maybe, even if you listen to all these things to manage anxiety, if you just maybe don't do anything else except that, let's see what changes. Let's see if you stop drinking for a month, what happens. Also, caffeine can be not so great, while it makes you feel more awake and alert. I need a little bit myself every day. It can exacerbate anxiety symptoms. So we can have nervousness and jitteriness related to the caffeine, which exacerbates anxiety. So if you're having large amounts of caffeine and you're also dealing with anxiety, we might want to start tapering that down. And obviously, other recreational drugs is a thing. Sleep, big deal. Good sleep will enhance that mental health, make anxiety easier to manage. The reason, there's a couple of reasons. So you want to have good sleep, but you also don't want sleep deprivation. Severe sleep deprivation increases anxiety levels during tasks, and you also, when you're not getting sleep, can catastrophize more. You can make things seem worse than they are, especially when you're working with patients in pretty serious situations and seeing a lot of death. Inadequate sleep acts as a chronic stressor. It impairs the brain function, overloads body symptoms. It can lead to memory impairment, cognitive fog, and an inability to cope with stress. So, among many other things, like disrupting hormone balance, increasing adrenaline levels, and increasing that anxiety. So the sleep is so important. I mean, even if it's just getting rid of booze and getting better sleep, boy, that can make a huge difference in anxiety symptoms. And then, as always, drink your water. I know y'all love your Stanleys. Make sure they got that ice water in it. Get a nutritious diet. We want to make sure our body is given the best possible chance to weather emotional storms. We don't want to be out in a shack in the middle of a field during a tornado, right? That's not going to be able to weather the storm very well, like a sturdy brick building with a basement. You need to have your house be strong too, because life will have emotions that come up, especially when we're dealing with death and patients going through really terrible things. So doing things like avoiding booze and drugs and getting good sleep, consuming foods that nourish your body, those are like really important acts of self-care. All right, let's get a little bit, we'll do a couple more. Social support and journaling. Do not isolate yourself from loved ones or activities that are important to you, because isolation amplifies suffering. Let me say that one more time. Isolation amplifies suffering, okay? Even if you don't want to see anybody, you're tired of talking to people. Like, if you're alone in tough emotions, it makes it so much easier to slide down that catastrophizing slide, okay? Even if you're doing something like, okay, if you're married, like my husband, we don't have to talk. A lot of us all need some scrolling time, like just to decompress, which I enjoy. If I'm just sitting next to him and we're like got a hand on each other, we're like connecting physically just next to each other instead of in a room separately. Or if you got friends that maybe you're working on something, I don't know, if you go to the coffee shop and you guys are together, you're not necessarily chatting actively, but you're near each other. Or watching something together with someone. So you're with people, especially people outside of work. Nursing can become all-consuming. Really important to have an identity outside of work, which means friends outside of work, interests outside of work, so that you are not just this person waiting to go back to work and heavily carrying the burden of work everywhere you go. We will carry the burden at work, and we're going to set it down and leave it there and go home to our regular lives and have our feet in the reality of our regular lives, not in that of our patients. So when you have social support, they can make that so much more enriching, much more to look forward to. And that social support can really decrease anxiety. Journaling is really helpful as well. It is a tool, a conduit to externalize your emotions. Again, making them more manageable to process and work through. Future self-journaling is my favorite. Got a link to it in here as well. So this all of these together can really lower your baseline level of anxiety, to really set yourself up for success. But now let's also talk about the fact that you're every day in this high intensity work environment. What can I do to manage it? Knowing I've got to be in this high intense pressure environment, whether you're working in an ICU, critical care transport, emergency department, regular floors. How do I cope with this? Okay, my number one is to develop routines to outsmart your brain. Okay. Almost like, you need to be like our brain doesn't always like catch up with what our body is doing. I like to compare this to whenever I played basketball in college. I would have late workouts. There'd be times I wouldn't get home till 11. My body would be in bed trying desperately to go to sleep for that freaking 5 a.m., 6 a.m. workout. That's not smart to schedule like that. But anyways, I'm like, my body's in bed, but my brain hasn't caught up. Maybe your body has left the ICU and the code that was actively going on when you left, but your brain is still there. Sometimes we just need to help our brain catch up with our body and the situation around us, okay? I think it is advantageous to do that before work and after work. So I think we need a pre-shift routine to reduce anxiety and a post-shift routine to reduce anxiety. So pre-shift anxiety, which can be referred to as anticipatory anxiety. You know that this stressful situation is coming up. You're already anxious about it. You're stress sleeping the night before. If we can get a customized routine, so I'm going to give you a sample one, but customized to your life, where you're like kind of mentally gearing up, almost like, I'm sorry I do all the sports comparisons, but that's just what I know. Like your pregame routine, your pregame pep talk. You wear this certain thing, you listen to this certain song, you do these certain warm-ups, and you're ready to get in game mode. You're switching from whatever mode it was earlier in the day to I am zoned in. Okay. That is the kind of prep I think is very helpful, because you are focusing on, like for example, when I was getting ready for games, I I was so in the moment. I was not worried about what was going on after the game. I was not worried about the dumb thing I said before the game or at school 3 hours earlier, because kids say dumb stuff all the time and they think about it. It's like I had this routine I had to go through, and the routine was important, and I needed to go through these steps so that I could be ready to go when the buzzer went off. So I want you to have that same mentality. Like, all right, I'm gearing up, getting ready to go, so that when I clock in, I'm on the top of my game and I can focus. And when you can focus, you're going to give better care. You're not going to be like head everywhere. You're going to be focused. So create some sort of like routine to get your brain ready to go. Okay. So for me, that would have looked like something like the night before, I'm setting out my scrubs. And whatever I'm going to wear, I'm packing my lunch, I'm getting the coffee ready, so turning the timer on. I got everything ready so that when my alarm goes off, I got everything I need. My alarm goes off, maybe I do my deep breaths, I turn on my comfort show in the background while I get ready, do a couple yoga poses, eat my breakfast. I on my commute, I listen. Like if it was me, I'd probably listen to a specific podcast. Shameless plug to the podcast you're already listening to, but people have told me that this podcast is actually quite comforting to listen to on the way to a shift. No big deal. Or music or whatever it is that kind of gets your head in the game. I would always have the same coffee with the same little breakfast like thing I could eat while I was driving, and then I'd turn. This is old. Frasier. Do you remember the show Frasier? There were a couple Frasier episodes I loved. I had like a 15-minute drive to work, and I put my Frasier on, driving to work, eating my favorite thing, drinking something I liked. I had all my stuff with me. I'm ready to go, people. So like that kind of thing to kind of gear myself up. I also have a little trick here. I heard this from a public speaker, because when you speak, you get nervous, right? So, and she was very experienced at it, but her advice was instead of saying, I feel so nervous, tell yourself, I'm excited to do this, because your brain has a hard time differentiating between genuine excitement and nervousness. So if you can change the wording that you're giving it in your brain, it kind of pulls that fear out of it. So if you're nervous walking into work, instead of saying, oh my God, I'm so nervous, tell yourself, I'm so excited I get to do this. Even if you're lying to yourself, it's okay. Just tell yourself that. And then maybe this continues too, like right up until you're ready to flow on your shift. So I would always do the same thing every time. I go in, bathroom break, I put my stuff away, bathroom break, fill up my water bottle. Cause I didn't fill up my water till I got to work because they had all the good ice. And then I would go to my check the assignment, go sit down at a computer, write down, pre-fill out the top of my report sheet, just the top. Make sure that night shift didn't forget some med at 1 a.m. that I'm not going to notice till 10 a.m. Double check to make sure they didn't miss anything and make sure everybody is like, no one's coding or anything like that. And then when I clock in, boom, I'm ready. I'm totally ready. I'm in the game, ready to go. It tells you, you're safe. It's predictability. Your body is ready to roll. And then I think we also need to do the same thing after a shift. Okay. After a shift, I know you've been there. You leave and it's like, I am hanging out with my friends at the bar. I'm hanging out at home with my husband or my wife or whatever. And I'm just not here mentally. I'm still thinking about the med I gave late, the way that person said something to me, or whatever it is. So I think a post-shift routine is also helpful too. So we want to soothe ourselves out of that all-consuming world of the hospital. We're going to go from our patient's world to our world, because when you are so focused intently, because you did your wonderful pre-shift routine, you are focused intently for however many hours. And when you're so focused, you can almost forget that there's an outside world. It's like, whoa, I forgot that I have a life here and I have things to do at home. You can almost like detach a little from your own reality. So you need to be intentional about stepping back into your own. So I'm going from my role as a nurse to my roles at home. Okay. So maybe you clock out, you head to your car, maybe you put your stuff in the same spot every time. You turn on that comforting, come home thing. Now I'd listen to Frasier on my way to work on the way home, I'd always call my mom. Every time. Mom, today was crazy. Let me tell you what happened. Like that was like my debrief. So I could kind of get that out. And so that by the time that I was home, I had kind of like externally processed it. And you don't even need to call anybody. You can talk to yourself and be like, I cannot believe that she did this. I cannot believe that happened. I'm so glad I did this. What about, like those kinds of things. Whatever it might need to be. Drive the same way home every time. And I would like take a shower as soon as I got home and I would visualize the stress of the day flowing down the drain. Sometimes, it's like, I'm not really looking at my phone much. I don't want like 15 minutes to just, what did I miss on social media today? Like that kind of thing. Let me get back. Cause like being on social media and seeing updates from my friends of their life and that also pulls me out of the work world and into my world. If I've got some pretty intense emotions or thoughts about it, I do a little self-compassion break where it's like, okay, I feel really frustrated that this happened. I know other nurses feel similar. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through this. It's kind of like working yourself through it. And then you just do whatever it is. Like for me, it'd be like, I want to watch I'm typically watching a show with my husband, that kind of thing, hear about his day, he shows me funny videos he found, like that kind of thing. And here's another little tip. When we work in a world that is very intense, I think it's really great before bed as a nurse if you read or engage in something with fiction. Okay. Reading relaxing fiction and getting lost in a world that isn't real can help us cope when our jobs are a little too real. So maybe you're not a huge fiction reader, but I just encourage that. You can kind of get lost in this other world. And then that transitions, you into this sense of predictability that can help. That didn't make sense. That sentence didn't make sense. Rewind. The sense of predictability that is provided by a routine like this really helps with anxiety production because you're not worried about the unknown ahead. You know what's happening, right? And you're being conscious that I'm giving my brain time to catch up with where my body is located and what I'm doing now. So I just encourage you to use these routines pre and post shift to get in the zone and then to get out of the zone, if that makes sense. Now, but what about work anxiety flares and freeze responses? Like, what if I'm at work and I'm feeling like this? So maybe you have a critical moment. It could be something as serious as like a code, or it can be when the mean charge nurse says something rude to you, and just about everything in between. In the hospital, we are regularly exposed to situations that signal danger to our brain. Like, it is a human response to see someone dying in front of you and freeze. It just is. Like, we're not like, or to get into this fight or flight situation, because that's what our bodies are designed to do. So if you're working in the hospital, we do have to do a little work to kind of desensitize that so that you can access the higher level thinking to be able to do the things that you've been trained to do. ACLS, BLS, all the things. So the thing is to recognize it early, and we're going to implement some coping strategies and some grounding techniques that will divert our mind from panic and refocus to the present. Okay? So I think it's really important to remember that you are not dumb. You are just panicking. Going to say that again. You are not dumb. You're just panicking. And a panicked response, when we see people dying or somebody, threatening or whatever it might be, it's human. We're human. We're going to kind of game the system here, knowing we're human, knowing that our body's going to do this. Let's work around it. Okay. When you panic, you remember what we said earlier, that prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain, that like part like right here above, like behind your forehead, it can't work. It can't be doing that. It can't be accessing the higher level information that you have worked so hard to learn. I mean, that's why, you get asked something in front of a group of people and then you can't remember it. And then all of a sudden when the pressure's off, you're like, gosh, I remember it. Like, that's the thing. That's it. We need to give ourselves some time for that to come back online, but we might not be in a situation where we can do that. Maybe somebody's literally dying in front of us. If it's a code situation, this is my thing. Remind yourself Get on the chest. If we're in a panicky situation, we need some basic couple word things to remember. Get on the chest, get on the chest. The most important thing in the code is that we have adequate chest compressions that are started quickly. So like if somebody starts coding in front of you, the absolute most important thing is, let's oversimplify, is that someone is giving chest compressions. Okay. So we don't need to think about all the other, get on the chest. Make sure that someone is giving good chest compressions. Once that is situated, we can, okay, someone get to the head of the bed. We're going to get the bag valve mask turned up. We're going to get some breaths after 15 compressions or 30 compressions, sorry. And then the code team can arrive or whatever it might be. If it's more of a social situation, we can pause to collect ourselves. We can say something like, you know what, I'm not sure. Let me find out that answer and get back to you. Let me look that up and circle back. Hang tight. Let me find out. I'm not sure. Sometimes we need to have an assertive response. Maybe someone was kind of disrespectful to us. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time. What was that? Like, I'm sorry. Please don't speak to me like that. Let's work together, take care of this patient, but I don't want you to be speaking to me like that. Like those kind of things. Like, or if you just say, excuse me, I'm sorry, what? Making somebody repeat something that is really ridiculous that they said in a knee-jerk reaction can help them kind of come back down. Those kind of things. We do talk a lot about assertiveness in my various courses, like the ICU course and the New Nurse Masterclass, which you can now access with our All Access Pass for a monthly subscription instead of purchasing the whole course. Just going to let you know that. But assertiveness is a big key there. And that can really pull you out of or make you less anxious about these situations because you know tactful ways to handle them. But if you're able to kind of pause, recollect, you could go to the bathroom, do a couple, 3 slow deep breaths and pull yourself out of that panic response. Let those slow deep belly breaths really stimulate your vagus nerve, that 10th cranial nerve, which lower your heart rate and can calm you down. So it's really important. So I need you to remember freezing is okay. With repeated exposure to these events, you will be able to engage in them quickly. That's why the ICU nurses or the code team people they don't skip a beat because they've been desensitized to it. You need to be desensitized. So it'll take some time to do that. So the more codes you can go to and respond to, the better to kind of desensitize yourself so you can access those the prefrontal cortex, and your amygdala can be like, all right, this isn't danger. We actually know what we need to do here. So give yourself some grace. Like, you're okay. That doesn't mean you're a bad nurse if you don't initially and innately respond to these situations with confidence. And if you have that social situation that really throws you off, taking a moment to pause and reflect, or not necessarily reflect, pause, remove yourself from the situation, go to the bathroom, maybe take some deep breaths, recollect, and then re-engage. And the most powerful thing is genuinely to recognize that it is happening. I am freezing right now. I am panicked right now. I am okay. Telling yourself actively, tell your brain you're okay. That is so helpful in the midst of an intense environment. And finally, I want you to recognize when to seek professional help. If you genuinely would think you're listening to this and, yeah, I'm an anxious nurse, I do think before some big event happens that causes guilt and just fear and shame or whatever, I highly encourage you to get some professional support. You likely can do that through EAP, through your hospital, and probably get some free therapy, and probably from some therapists that are used to supporting nurses. And my thing is, you can just call them and say, hey, you know what? I'm noticing increased anxiety related to work and want to explore some coping mechanisms to manage it better. Boom. Totally reasonable. You don't sound like ridiculous at all. That is a genuine need, a reasonable need, especially for a nurse. So proactively stepping in and being like, hey, I'm noticing these things. How can I cope with this better? I can't tell you just the power of just going in and saying that and then having a third party validate. That reduces anxiety. Knowing you've got that support reduces your anxiety. So just really want to encourage to see a professional if you're finding that, boy, this anxiety is getting worse. It's not related to isolated situations that's resolving. It's impacting my daily life. And this can be a slow burn. I was starting to suffer from this, and it took me a long time to be like, whoa, this is what's going on. Maybe I should go get some help. Like, that took time. And when I went, I was like, man, I wish I had done this way earlier. So I hope that you find that encouraging. In this post that I will link in the description, I also have some great little quotes, a personal story from an anxious nurse, and links to a bunch of stuff that I think you'll find really, really helpful. So you got to check this post out. And I'm just so grateful for you guys taking time to listen. I want to hear your comments. Comment on the post. I'd love to hear your perspective of your experience, if you had anxiety or nervousness, how you coped with it, or if it's not going so great and you need a little encouragement. Click on that link, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. So thank you guys for listening today, and stay fresh.